Okay, today we are going to use what is called the discriminant in order to figure out how many solutions the quadratic should have before we even try to solve it. So the discriminant is the part that is underneath the radical sign in the quadratic formula. So the part that's underneath the radical sign, if I remember the quadratic formula, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The discriminant part is only the part that's under the square root. So it's the b squared minus 4ac. Okay, and the reason why this gives us the number of solutions is because if this number comes out, we'll talk about that in just a minute. I don't want to give it away. So quadratic equations can have 1, 2, or no solutions, and you can determine that by using the discriminant. And we'll talk about why here in just a minute. If we look here, what does the solution of the quadratic equation represent on a graph of a function? On the graph of a function, it represents where it crosses the x-axis. So if I look at this graph here, it crosses the x-axis here and here. So if I were to solve this, this one should have 2 solutions. This one crosses or touches the x-axis at only 1 point, so it has 1 solution. And then finally, this one does not touch this x-axis at all, so this has no solutions. So we're going to use that idea in order to see what the different discriminants will give us. So if I look here on this first one, oops, it helps if I erase everything I need to. I'm going to do the discriminant of each one of these. The discriminant, remember, is b squared minus 4ac. So on this first one, b squared negative 6 squared minus 4 times a times c gives me 24. So my discriminant here is 24. I'm going to write it down here. On this next one, b squared minus 4 times a times c gives me 0. So my discriminant in this graph is 0. And finally, my discriminant here is negative b minus 4 times a times c, which gives me negative 12. Okay, remember this discriminant is underneath a square root symbol. So if I were to take the square root of any positive number, for instance number 24, there are always 2 answers. So that's why there's 2 solutions. If I were to take the square root of 0, that always only gives me 1 solution. So anytime the discriminant is 0, there's only 1 solution. And finally, to take the square root of any negative sign, it's not possible because no number times itself will give you anything that is negative. So that's why if the discriminant is negative, there are no solutions. So our rules are summed up down below. If the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, is greater than 0, so that means if it is positive, there are 2 solutions. If the discriminant is equal to 0, there is 1 solution. And finally, if the discriminant is less than 0, which means it's negative, there are no solutions. So you need to remember those rules. So if we look at our next page at the examples to use them, the first one just wants us to find the number of solutions. So I'm going to do the discriminant. And we have to make sure this is equal to 0, so I have to rewrite this in standard form, 3x squared minus 5x. If I move that 1 over, I minus 1 equal to 0. Now I can use my discriminant. b squared negative 5 squared minus 4 times A times C. If I do that, that gives me 13. Since 13 is a positive number, that means this, if I were to solve it, would have two solutions. If I were to graph it, it means that it crosses the x-axis at two places. Example 2 is a real-world problem solving. A construction worker on the ground tosses an apple to a fellow worker who's 20 feet above the ground. The starting height of the apple is 5 feet. Its initial upward velocity is 30 feet per second. Will the apple reach the second worker? So first of all, we have to remember our formula for this that was given to us last section. It was the height is equal to negative 16 t squared plus the initial velocity, which the initial upward velocity here is 30 t, plus c, which stood for the starting height. In this case, it is 5. And we want to know if the apple will reach the second worker. Well, it says the second worker is 20 feet above the ground. So the height the apple would have to go is 20 feet. So I'm going to sub that in there. And we're going to see at what time here it would reach it. So if I do this, I need to get this in standard form, so I need to move that 20. And all it's asking is, would it? It doesn't ask at what time or how much time would pass before it does. So I just need to know, is there a solution to this quadratic equation? So I'm going to just check my discriminative. If I have b squared, which is 30 squared, minus 4 times a times c, if I complete that discriminative, I get 60. And it's a negative 60. Since my number is negative here, that means it would have no solution, meaning it would never reach it no matter how much time passes, because my discriminant was negative. Go ahead and complete the quick checks and then check your schedule for your assignment.